Okay, just a quick reminder to take the quiz when you're done with the video. It's in the assignments folder, and we're in a new chapter now, so circulation and respiration. And here is a preview of the questions. We spent last chapter looking at how food is digested and broken down into smaller parts that our bodies use to grow, repair damage, and maintain normal body functions. So now we're going to follow those nutrients as they're absorbed from the small intestines into the bloodstream. The small intestine is covered in villi, which are covered in microvilli. At the microvilli, there's only a single layer of cells separating the small intestine from tiny blood vessels called capillaries. The capillaries will transport nutrients throughout the body. Here, we're going to take a look at how nutrients pass across the cell membrane of intestines and into the bloodstream. Have you ever drunk soda when you were really thirsty and then ended up even more thirsty? You were drinking, so shouldn't you be less thirsty? You feel thirsty when your cells don't have enough water inside of them. Drinking water helps to fill those cells back up. Once water and nutrients are inside the body, they must travel to all the cells. We've seen nutrients transported across the walls of the small intestine into the bloodstream, and water crosses into the bloodstream from the large intestine. When lungs exchange carbon dioxide and oxygen, substances again need to be transported across membranes. There are three ways substances get transported across the cell membrane, depending on what type of molecule are moving and the environment surrounding the cell. Diffusion is the movement of a substance across the membrane from high concentration to low concentration. But not everything moves from high concentration to low concentration, and not everything can easily move through the cell membrane. Active transport involves the movement of large substances, or moving things from low to high concentration, the opposite way they tend to want to move. It's called active transport because it requires energy. Facilitated diffusion is when solutes move from high to low concentration through a protein channel. It's called facilitated because the molecules need help passing through the cell membrane. Finally, osmosis is the movement of water from high to low concentration. Diffusion is the movement of substances from high concentration to low concentration. This happens in our lungs when carbon dioxide moves out of the body, where it's less concentrated, and oxygen moves into the body, where it's less concentrated. Many times, water is able to move across the membrane much more easily than other substances. The diffusion of water has a special name since it happens so often. It's called osmosis. The other substances dissolved in the water are known as solutes. Facilitated diffusion is a passive process, meaning no energy is required, but it also requires the use of protein channels. The protein channel that let small substances and ions across the membrane are specific to the molecule they allow through. For example, in our nerve cells, there's sodium channels and potassium channels. Each one only allows through either sodium or potassium. Water has its own channel, but doesn't require any energy, so it can be thought of as a type of facilitated diffusion. Water moves across the membrane through the process of osmosis. It has to move through a special protein channel called an aquaporin, but they don't require any energy to do so. Three terms describe the relative concentration of solutes inside and outside a cell. These are comparison terms, so they're always used in relation to their surroundings. Isotonic means the concentration of solutes is the same inside and outside the cell. As a result, the same number of water molecules is moving into the cell as are moving out of the cell. Hypertonic means more solutes. So if you say a cell is hypertonic, it has more solutes than the environment that it's in. But you can also say that the solution is hypertonic. This would mean that the environment has more solutes. You can see why it's important to specify what is hypertonic, because the previous two statements reflect completely different conditions. Hypotonic means less solutes. I always remember hyper and hypo because I think of a hyper child who has just had a lot of sugar. Lots of sugar, lots of solutes. Hypertonic, hyperkid. It's the concentration of solutes that determines how osmosis happens. You can remember where water is going to move by thinking of the phrase salt sucks. What that means is that salt pulls water towards itself. Wherever there's a high concentration of salt, there's a lower concentration of water. Therefore, water will always move from high concentration to low concentration. In other words, from where there is more salt, or where there's less salt to where there's more salt. So salt sucks water towards itself so that there's an equal concentration of solutes and water on each side of the membrane. Active transport refers to any type of transport that requires energy. There are two general reasons why energy would be required. The first is that materials moving across the cell membrane are large. This happens often in single-celled organisms. It's the way they eat, by pinching inwards a piece of their cell membrane so that it surrounds the food. Doing this forms a food vesicle inside of the cell. When these cells want to get rid of waste products, the opposite process takes place. The waste is put into vesicles, which fuse with the cell membrane, spilling its contents outside of the cell. The second reason energy would be required to move things across the cell membrane is if the substance was moving against the concentration gradient. In other words, from low concentration to high concentration. This is backwards of the way that things usually want to move. Protein pumps are special protein channels that use energy and allow substances to move from low to high concentration. This can be found in your nerve cells. Pumping in sodium is important in allowing messages to move down a cell to another part of your body.